Hi, my name is Greer. I'll be covering the Saturday and Sunday portion of this week's Let's Be Honest vlog. I hope you heard that through the train. Anyway, this week's topic is: in what ways do you feel you receive privilege in assumed queer safe spaces? In what ways do you feel said space? Whatever. Talking about queer safe space. Um, I think that because I experience a lot of train, because I experience a lot of privilege in the outside heteronormative world, I experience a lot of privilege in queer safe spaces. Just because, like, a space, say, is like safe for gay people doesn't mean that it's safe for like this specific bodies within that space and the ways in which those bodies experience their queerness, and that, like, oppression those bodies experience in the outside world um, sort of translate into a queer space, but kind of looks a little different, I guess. Because I experience white, middle class, well educated, etc., privilege in the outside world, I also experience that in queer safe spaces. Um, Generally, not all the time. Um, I have felt unsafe in queer safe spaces, such as when I go to, like, what I think is going to be a gay bar, and because I identify as gay, like, I'll be accepted, and I walk in, and it's just like a huge fucking sausage fest, and all the homos there look like they want to rip my head off, and like I'm taking up space. I mean, that's something I've experienced as, like, a dyke. But there isn't much, like, sometimes dyke visibility is hard to find, even within the queer community. Um, Something else I wanted to touch on was privileges I receive in queer safe space as um, a validation of ideals, or like ideas of beauty. Um, and this is something I'm going to juxtapose to previous experiences of mine, particularly when it comes to fat privileges I receive as a thin body in queer space. Um, for the first 18 or 19 years of my life, I was fat and was diagnosed by the medical industry as being technically obese. Even before I came to terms with my gayness, I identified as straight because I was, in a lot of things, but mainly in my experience, because I was a fat body, I was invalidated of any sexuality, or expressions of my sexuality were either very intensely disrespected or exotified, or trivialized. A fat person being sexual, in my experience, generally turned into a joke. And when I came to terms with my gayness, and, like, I realized I was a big old homo, I, you know, queers being another identity that within society are othered, particularly in association with the fact that, like, particularly with sexuality and beauty. So when I started investigating or experiencing queer spaces, I thought that there would be in those spaces a definition or like a new experience of beauty, a validation of my sexuality as a whole, or that I would be accepted as attractive or beautiful. And I found that in, you know, queer only clubs or queers only dance, I don't know, like queer gay bars, whatever, like I experienced fat, like I felt othered because I was fat, and particularly like invalidated as sexual because I was fat. And that was particularly hurtful because, you know, I kind of thought that entering a queer safe space, a space that is supposed to be accepting of or understanding of sexualities that are non-recognized in the outside world, wasn't. I experienced and like heard and saw like a lot of fat phobia in queer space, and the way people interacted with me and choreographed themselves around my body, and the ways in which people reacted to my body as a fat person moving through space, differs greatly from my experience now as a thin person. I'm able to, I identify now as a thin person, not without a great deal of body dysmorphia, but through my experience of how people treat me, particularly as a queer person in queer spaces. I don't know if that made any sense, but I hope it did. I also feel like just one more thing, I feel more validated by the outside world, and in queer safe space, that because I am now thin, which is a more accepted visualization of feminine beauty, I am more accepted as being gay. It's more like allowed almost in the straight world, and also valued more in queer safe space, and that's a privilege I definitely experience. And specifically in relation to sexuality, and something that's very specific, a very specific experience as a thin queer body versus my experience as a fat queer body. So yeah, I'm gonna save my validating queer story for next week, because my iPhoto keeps shutting down. But I hope you have a good one, and I hope I didn't sound too insane.